Welcome to the Power Lunch on LinkedIn Live. This is Rhett Power. I'm your host. We do this program every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday around 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on LinkedIn's new live platform. Today, we've got a great guest. We'll talk about that in just a second. But, my promise to you is to always have thought leaders, CEOs, best-selling authors, people who are doing really amazing things in the world, people that we can learn from so that we can get better. That's my promise to you. Now, the fun part about this show is that it is interactive. And so in order for that to happen, you guys have to ask questions. So please ask your questions throughout the broadcast. We'll try to check. If you see me looking over here to the side, I'm trying to check social media to see if we have some good questions for our guest. So please do that. I think Bob and I both are really interested in hearing from you. Now, we're also simulcasting this on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, with the help of Social Live and their platform. If you like the program, give it a like or share, spread the word so other people can learn. As again, my promise to you is to bring you the best. Today is no exception. I've got Bob Burg, the one and only. Bob is a best-selling author. His book sales are getting close to 2 million, probably already topped that. His Go-Giver series is recognized all over the world. We'll talk about the Go-Giver way today a little bit. I want to dig into that and find out what that means. He's a sought-after speaker. In fact, he's in the Speakers Hall of Fame. His podcast, the Go-Giver series, the Go-Giver podcast is every Thursday at 3, right, Bob?
Tuesday, but
every Tuesday,
once a week.
Every Tuesday, okay. Well, I want to make sure people can find it because it's a great podcast.
Thank you.
That you can listen to anytime. Anyway, let's get to it, Bob. Thank you for joining us, Bob Burg.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, you've been in the public eye for a long time and a public figure for a long time. But so I wanted to ask you a question to sort of warm up this morning and ask you, what is something that nobody knows, that people don't typically know about you? What's something unique that's about Bob that we should all know?
Probably more than anything that I'm very much an introvert, that I really do not derive my energy by being out and around people, but by being by myself or with a very, very, close group of people I'm comfortable with. And but I
would never know that by your stage presence.
Thank you. And and of course I'm very friendly and outgoing when I'm with people and so forth, and there's nothing phony about it. It's that's who I am. But I do not derive my energy from that. And if I'm not working, right, I'm at home and I'm reading and just kind of hanging out. And so that's probably I think the biggest thing that seems to surprise people.
I love the fact that you're an animal lover too, right?
Yeah, very much. I think everybody pretty much who knows me knows that about me, though. That's why I didn't mention that as a
to the LinkedIn world, though. Maybe that's new information. But your work with is it shelters and
with Furry Friends Adoption Clinic and Ranch here in Jupiter, and also a supporter of PETA and basically any animal group, any animal rescue group, any group that doesn't want to see animals used as research experiments where they're basically tortured. Anything like that, I very much support any group like that.
Well, that's good. I wanted people to get to know you a little bit, aside from all the public stuff that's out there. Can you tell us about you've got this process, this sort of relationship cultivation process? Is that something you can talk about today and why it's important?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think really it's always about the relationship when it comes right down to it. I mean, there are different times when there are certain transactions that don't have to be relational. You can buy a gumball, it's not relational, or it's something, you buy what have you. But for business to to be able to really sell anything of substance to another human being and make that business sustainable, it is about the relationship. And so to the degree that we understand that and can direct that and relate to people in a way that they feel good about us, and even more importantly, that we make them feel good about themselves, that's the degree that we are most likely going to be very successful.
What is this unique, and what is this process that you have though? Because I mean, you're an expert in sort of building relationships, cultivating relationships. Are there steps that people can take? I mean, I do want to talk about this kind of at length today, because I think it ties into selling, it ties into building a network, it ties into how do you use that network to gain leads. So, I mean, that's sort of where I might go today, depending on the conversation. But I think that's something that I'm really interested in.
Well, Rhett, I believe it all begins with a premise, and this is actually the premise of the Go Giver books and the Go Giver series, and that is simply that shifting your focus, and this is really the key, shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others, understanding that not only is that a pleasant way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. Not because it's some kind of do-goody, karmic type of, oh, just do good things for people and good that. No, not at all.
Right.
It's really understanding the essence of human nature that I think Carnegie pointed out, and as the foundational premise of his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, where he said ultimately people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So when you think about it, and I often will say this at the beginning of a sales conference or sales congress where I speak, and that is simply this: nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet.
Right.
They're not going to buy from you because you need the money, and they're not even going to buy from you because you're a really nice person who believes in what you do. They're going to buy from you only because they believe they'll be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And in the free market based economy out of which most of us operate, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one is forced to do business with anyone else. People do so on their own volition. So in a free market-based economy, that's the only reason why anyone should buy from you, from me, or from anyone else, because they believe they'll benefit. Now, this is a great thing because it means those entrepreneurs and sales professionals who put their focus in the right place on the other person, that's the person who is going to most likely create that context where the sale takes place. And this is why John David Mann, my awesome co-author, why we say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning, which means nothing more than that the focus must be on providing value to the marketplace, value to others. That comes first. The money you receive is simply a very natural result of the value you've provided.
Okay. Okay. So you said something interesting in there that sort of sparked a question. So when you're dealing with in sales, when you're dealing with sort of price versus value, how do you? I remember being a young salesperson, and it was always my sales manager drilled in price, 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 right? And how do you make that shift? Because I think that we get so focused on that price question all the time, and not that value, not providing, because it goes to what you said, like you've got to solve, you're trying to solve their needs, right?
Well, selling by its very nature is simply discovering, and that's the key, discovering what the other person wants, needs, or desires, and helping them to get it. Now, in a more complex sale, you have to almost go past that to helping them, to adding insight into challenges they may not even know they have, and positioning yourself as that person who can solve those and really ultimately provide so much immense value to that customer. But let's go back to the difference between price and value, because I think it really begins there. Law number one from the Go Giver says, give more in value than you take in payment. Well, that sounds kind of counterintuitive when you think about it.
Yeah.
Give more in value than you take in payment. Isn't that a recipe for bankruptcy?
Sounds like it.
Right. Well, so now let's look at price and value and understand the difference. Price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. Value, on the other hand, Rhett, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, that brings so much worth or value to someone that they will willingly, remember, free market, willingly exchange their, in this case, money for that value and feel great about it while you make a very healthy profit. If we take one very elementary example, you hire an accountant to do your tax returns, and this accountant charges you, and we'll just name a round figure, $1,000. Well, that's her fee, or literally her price, $1,000. But what value is she giving you in exchange for that? Well, she saves you over $5,000 in taxes. She saves you countless hours of time, and she provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. So first, again, we see that while price is finite, value can be both concrete in terms of that $5,000, pretty easy to get our arms around, but it can also be conceptual in terms of that peace of mind. And how do you even put a price tag right on that peace of mind? So what she did is she gave you more in value than she took, but she gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 price. So you feel great about it. And she also made a very healthy profit, because to her, it was well worth it to lease out her time for $1,000. So both came away. Now, and here's the thing, and this is where the law of value really sings and why it's so beautiful. Because I'm not saying beautiful because we wrote it. I'm just saying why it really works out. One of my old mentors, Harry Brown, used to say, in a free market-based exchange, there are always two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them came away better off afterwards than they were before. That makes so much sense. Let's take this to another level, though, because how do we increase the value over and above the intrinsic value of the product or service? Because let's face it, technology has leveled the playing field. Most products work well, and they work about the same. Most services are pretty good and just about the same. So how do you distinguish yourself? How do you separate yourself? Because let's face it, even if you do better what your competitors do, until your prospective customer or client knows that, they don't know that. And let's face it, if a prospective customer or client cannot distinguish between any two or more products, services, or vendors, they're always going to go with who has the lowest price. And unless your last name is Walmart or maybe even Amazon.com, I'm going to suggest that trying to make low price your unique selling proposition is not a good way to do business. It's not productive, it's not profitable, and it's certainly not sustainable. So the question is, but if things are basically commoditized, how do I distinguish myself? Well, you need to be that additional value, because remember, they're buying you and the experience before they buy the product, service, or even company. So now the question is, well, how do I communicate that additional value? And the good news is there are dozens, if not hundreds, of ways to communicate that additional value, but they tend to come down to 5 what we call elements of value. And these 5 are excellence, consistency, attention, empathy, and appreciation. And to the degree that you're able to communicate, and when I say you, I mean you or and anyone at your company, to the degree you're able to communicate one or more of these from the initial touch point, that contact, whether it's outbound or inbound, through the relationship building process, through the sales process, through the follow-up and follow through, through the actual sale, the referrals, what have you. To the degree you're able to do that, that's the degree that you take price and your competition out of the equation.
So it's really about building a customer experience that's second to none.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got a product, I come from the toy business, for example, and I remember, we're losing at the time when I got out of the business, we were losing about 10% of small toy stores around the country every year.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that were surviving were really, their customer experience when you walked in the store, that's what set them apart from all the others that were closing their doors. They made it so that you wanted to go on a Saturday morning and sit there and drink a cup of coffee and watch the kids play. Right.
That's right.
And you walked out of the store with something guaranteed because they made it such a entertaining experience.
Exactly.
And that was the way they could differentiate themselves.
Yeah.
And they were expensive, but you didn't care because it was fun to go.
Yeah.
They made an experience actually for the parents. They thought, okay, we need to make this an experience for the kids, but we have to think about who's actually buying.
Of course, absolutely. Absolutely. It needs to be thought out. And this is how Main Street mom and pop businesses have been able to survive even with a Walmart, in town. There's certain things that they can do that Walmart simply can't.
Right.
And that's what you've got to take advantage of.
What is for all the managers and leaders, entrepreneurs out there listening, are there some tips that you have that could help them develop their team's ability to influence and persuade? Are there some things that you think that might help sort of that from a manager's perspective that they can do?
Well, persuasion, which, and if you look at influence, because persuasion is simply the positive form of influence, right? Because the two types of influence are persuasion and manipulation. Influence itself, influence on a very basic level, is simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. Now, that's the definition, but that's not the essence of influence. The essence of influence is pull as opposed to push, as in, how far can you push a rope? And the answer is not very far, at least not very fast or very effectively. That's why great influencers don't push. You never hear people say, wow, that David or that Sally, she is so influential. She has a lot of push with people, right? She sure is pushy. Wow, that is so great. No, she's influential. She has a lot of pull. And pull it's an attraction, okay? And great influencers attract people. And they attract people first to themselves and only then to their ideas. We talked earlier about Carnegie's when he said about people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So a great leader, a great influencer, a great persuader, they look inward first and they ask themselves, am I on track? Am I focused in the right place, which is on those people you're looking to lead? So you ask questions such as, how does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does it align with their goals?
Right.
With their wants, their needs, their desires. How does what I'm asking this other person to do, how does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? What challenges of theirs am I helping to solve through this? And if you can align, obviously, your goals, tie those in with that person's goals, well, now you've got people who are going to accept. But let's just briefly talk. I mentioned the difference between persuasion and manipulation, because both of those are forms of influence. That's one reason why I say there's nothing more dangerous than a bad person with good people skills. Okay. Yeah. Influence and persuasion, persuaders and manipulators both understand the laws of influence. Persuaders and manipulators both understand human nature. They both understand human action and motivation. So manipulators and persuaders are cousins, but one's the evil cousin, manipulation. And one's the good cousin, persuasion. In his wonderful book written back in 1987, or published in 1987, Dr. Paul W. Sweats wrote, manipulation aims at control, not cooperation. Okay. It does not consider the good of the other party. It results in a win-lose situation. Now, in direct contrast to the manipulator, the persuader always seeks to enhance the position of the other party. Thus, people act more responsibly because they're treated as responsible, self-directing individuals. So the big difference between manipulation and persuasion is intent. A manipulator might not want to hurt the other person, but if that's what it takes to get their way, they'll do it. It's all about them. They're very I-focused or me-focused. With a persuader, that could never happen, because in order for a persuader to feel good about the situation, they've got to know that not only is it in the best interest of that other person, but that other person knows that and feels good about it. So, manipulators also have to make sure they're not rationalizing. Well, I know it's in that person's best interest. Well, that's still, and
Right.
so, so that's really what it's about. So persuasion as a positive part of influence is very, very important, because without it, nothing happens, right? People don't take action.
Is that presence? You said something that about being drawn to somebody. Is that something that people can learn? I know some of that is natural in some people. You can tell people when they walk in the room and they light up a room and people are drawn to them. Not everybody has that whatever that is. But is that something that you can learn? Is it in the way you talk? Is it things that you say? Is it what?
Yeah. Let's talk about that, because that's so very important. Because we think, back when I was a kid, it was always the John F. Kennedy was that embodiment of that person who, when he walked into a room, right. And how many of us have that, right? To quote Lloyd Benson, as you might remember.
I remember Lloyd.
I knew Jack Kennedy.
And Bob Burg, Jack Kennedy.
I know Jack Kennedy. So that's not something I can And so, no, we don't have to have that natural sense that, that some people do have. Hey, and God bless them. That's wonderful. But no, for most of us, and in fact, it's interesting. If you remember Jim Collins' classic Good to Great, and he talked about the difference between level 4 leaders and level 5 leaders. And level 4 and the two top types of leaders, level 4 and level 5, were both very talented. Level 5 leaders tended to be the Jack Kennedys. They tended to be those charismatic ones that, but they often level 4, excuse me, I meant level 4 tended to be the naturally charismatic Jack Kennedy, or, the ones that they lit up the room and they were the issue, right? They were the deal. Right. Challenge is, when they left, often the effectiveness of the company went with them, right? Right. Level 5 leaders, on the other hand, they were more modest. They were more low key. They didn't have that necessarily natural sense of charisma, but they were great leaders. People were attracted to them. They were typically the ones who listened more than they spoke, right? And it was about the team. They took the blame when things went wrong, but they gave credit when things went right. That is going to serve you in the long run. Or I should say sustainably, because sometimes you say long run, it means, oh, well, but not in the short run. No, in the short run too.
Yeah.
But it's more sustainable than just the person with that natural sense of charisma. Now, by all means, if you have that natural sense of charisma, go with it, but also understand it's only going to get you so far. Usually, it's not as sustainable. So you need to really place your focus on others. It's what we call moving from that I focus or me focus to an other focus. Looking as Sam, one of the mentors in the original Go Giver story, told Joe, the protege, it's making your win all about the other person's win.
Yeah. I think that's
really
charismatic. That's really yeah, and that's, like you said, I think that serves you better in the long run, doesn't it?
Right.
What is building a network today, to me, seems really. When I was coming up, it was, people you went to school with, people you grew up with, people you did business with in business, you went to events. Now you've got Facebook and LinkedIn, and it just seems kind of overwhelming. What is the key to building a network today? And where do you sort of start? Where do you focus if you're a leader? And I guess the other question to that is as an entrepreneur today, you hear, oh, I've got to build my own personal brand and my own personal network. At the same time, I'm trying to build my companies in order for it to be, successful. And I've got to generate content and I've got to do all this. Do you buy into any of that, to all that? And
well, I mean, I think there are a lot of moving parts there, Rhett, but I think it begins when we, again, define, because it all, always goes back to premises so often, doesn't it? And so
Right.
we look at what is networking, if you think about it. And so many people, and I've been speaking on this stuff, my book, Endless Referrals, Network, Everyday Contact, and the Sales, which came out in the early 90s.
Right.
This was back in the day. There were like 3 books on networking back then. Okay. I mean, now they come out of the woodwork, and many of them are wonderful. But back then, but that's just to say, I've been speaking on this topic for a long time, and it's still one of the most misunderstood concepts, because you say the word networking and so many people picture that stereotypical networking sales guy, right? The one who works around, they go around glad-handing and backhanding and slap-handing and shake-handing and sticking business cards into people's face and saying, hey, give me a call with you, right? And all that. Well, that's not networking.
Which if you're like you and I, who hate doing that,
right? Exactly.
That's hard.
Yeah, and it's not effective. So so I define networking as simply the cultivating of mutually beneficial give and take, or give and receive, win-win relationships. But as you notice, the stress is on the word give. Okay, so again, it goes right back to focusing on the other person.
It all comes back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you find that when you do that, whether it's in person or whether it's online, I always say the basic premise of networking is that, all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. I've been saying this for 35 years. It's often quoted, and it's often misquoted, and certain parts are left out of it. And that's okay. I mean, it is what it is. But you think about it, all things being equal or close enough to equal, people will do business with and refer business to not computers they know, like, and trust, not social platforms they know, like, and trust, but those people they know, like, and trust. So when people say, well, how is networking online different from networking in person? Well, I think online and social media gives us access to people. It presents us with a context for access to people we may never have had the opportunity to meet, and we can develop a very good relationship with this person. But we always need to remember, and this is what I say, before you tweet or post or pin or whatever the lingo is for that particular medium, ask yourself the question: is what I'm about to hit send on, is it going to add value to another person's life?
Yeah, that's the basic question, right?
It comes down to that. And that's how you build relationships. You add value to people's lives, and you do it consistently. And you do it not because you're trying to get something from it. You do it because it's who you are. You are a bringer of value to others. And because it's who you are, it's what you do. And as you do this, and you do this constantly and consistently, and you build those know, like, and trust relationships, now you've got people who want to be your personal walking ambassador. And that's when, business gets a lot more fun, a lot less stressful, and certainly a lot more profitable.
Can you build those sort of walking brand ambassadors online?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I can tell you from personal experience, and also from many of the people who I interact with and speak with.
Because your LinkedIn following is insane, by the way.
Pardon?
Because your LinkedIn following is insane, by the way. I mean,
it's a good group of people, and it's really just people we all converse with each other.
It's
and
awesome.
We're all bring value to others. But I'll tell you a funny story. One of my favorite people, one of my mentors, her name is Dondi Scumaci. She's a wonderful leadership speaker and author. And this is years ago. We had connected on Twitter, and I don't remember how, but I was interviewing her on my podcast, and it was probably about a year after I met her, I guess, on Twitter. And when we got on back then, we were doing it through the phone. This is even before, we were doing the phone. We were on the call and on the thing. And I said, hey, Donnie, how are you? She goes, oh, good, Bob. How are you? I said, so what's been going on? And we're talking. I said, wait a second. Have we ever actually spoken before? And we hadn't. but but the relationship online, so yeah, when people say you can't build hey, something, when I first started in sales, I was prospecting by telephone. I built relationships on the telephone. Sure, absolutely, you can build them online, but you've always got to go back to the fact that it's all about focusing on others and bringing value to them.
Yeah, indeed. What are your 5 laws of stratospheric success? I just love that.
Oh, thank you.
I love that term.
The laws themselves are the laws of value, which we went over a little bit earlier. Laws of value, the law of value, and then the law of compensation, the law of influence, the law of authenticity, and the law of receptivity, which kind of pulls it home. We say the law of value is the foundational principle upon which you build. The law of receptivity, though, is what brings it home. And it's also just as important because the two are not opposite concepts. They're simply two sides of the very same coin. And at the end of the story, and John David Mann, my co-author, who's really the lead writer and the storyteller, and he was a great entrepreneur in his time, and now he's just a brilliant storyteller. I'm more of a how-to kind of guy, but he wrote that part, I thought, so beautifully when he had Joe and Pindar talking to each other, and Pindar asked Joe to breathe out, but not breathe in. Right. You can't do that. You got to do both. Well, exactly. We breathe out, we breathe in. We breathe out carbon dioxide, we breathe in oxygen. We breathe out, which is giving. We breathe in, which is receiving.
Receiving, right.
You got to do both.
Yes, I love that. We have a question from, I'm going to mispronounce your name and I do apologize. Jinkya Jahav. He said, Bob, I'm performing a TEDx talk in about 3 weeks from today in one of the biggest stages in the world. Surely the viewership for this talk will be in the hundreds of thousands. Do you have any words of advice to me before the event?
Well, I'm going to assume that you know your topic, okay, and that you know your audience, and that you know how your talk will benefit the audience in front of you, as well as the viewers. Practice it, rehearse it, absolutely know this, not so that it sounds rehearsed, but just like, at Brighton, people say, are you saying you should go up there and, rehearse it? And I'm saying, if you ever go to a play, whether it's on Broadway or your Main Street theater, and you look at those wonderful actors up there on stage, do you for a minute think they're winging it? Absolutely not. They've practiced so much that it's now part of them. They used to say about Yul Brynner, who played in The King and I, he played the king. They say he didn't play the king, he was the king, right? And so you want to get you want to get this talk so well down, okay, that you don't have to think about. See, because if you have to think about what you're saying, then it's about you. You want to be able to focus your energy on that audience. Now, in terms of becoming an even better speaker, now you maybe go to somebody and you go to somebody like a Michael and Amy Port, who have heroic public speaking.
Yeah, they're great, by the way.
Oh my gosh! Well, we send our certified go-giver speakers. Many of them take Michael. We promote Michael and Amy's courses because they're so good. And there are others as well, and I don't mean to leave anybody out, but Michael and Amy are kind of our go-to people that we, but and now you're not going to change anything in the next few weeks necessarily, but to really get to that point where you just own that. Well, now you go into you maybe look up Michael and Amy and take their course, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you've gotten that gig, it's because you're already very, very good. And it's just a matter of making sure you understand it's always about your audience, not about you. But that doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of knowing your talk and your audience and so forth.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Good luck. Wish you the best of success.
You had a fascinating story about a passing mentor that you've told, and I just wanted to repeat that today, because I think we all have those people that come in and out of our lives that influence us, and I think that yours was really pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I was telling you earlier about Dondi Scumaci. She and I coined the phrase, and I think she coined it, and I agreed with it. So because she's smart like that, she would think about
we'll go with
drive-by mentor.
Okay.
And a drive-by mentor is that person who just kind of happens to be there and offers some advice at the very moment that not only do you need it, but you're receptive to it, right? Because how often do we get some advice that we're not open to, right? And so I had been in sales for a couple of years at the time and was doing pretty well. I had learned sales, but I was kind of like Joe in the Go-Giver, right? I wasn't nearly reaching my potential, and I was very frustrated. And I remember coming back, and remember, Joe's issue was his focus was in the wrong place. It was on himself. It was on the process, not necessarily, right? And I think it was the same. Now I had a great product I was selling. I was working for another company, and they had a great product. I was proud of what I sold, but it was about the sale, right? And it was, yes, it was bringing great value to others, but it was really about the sale. If you can understand the difference, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A little off, and I didn't realize it. And I remember coming back to the office one day after a disappointing non-selling appointment. It was not non-selling by design. It was supposed to be a selling appointment, but I didn't do the proper job. And I must have looked discouraged or disgusted, or a combination of the both, because this person, and he was an older guy, much older guy, who wasn't even in sales. He was as I recall, he was in the engineering department. But he was one of these guys, a quiet guy, just a nice guy, but very quiet. But whenever he said something, it always seemed to be profound. So when he said to me, "Burg, can I give you some advice?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely, please do." And he said, "If you want to make a lot of money in sales," he said, "don't have making money as your target. Your target is serving others. Now, when you hit the target," he said, "you'll get a reward. And that reward will come in the form of money. And you can do with that money whatever you choose, but never forget the money is simply the reward for hitting the target. It ain't the target itself. Your target is serving others." And that was it. That I got, okay? And I realized at that point that good salesmanship was never about the salesperson. In fact, it wasn't even about the product or service, as good as the product or service needs to be and as important as I did. No, it's about the other person, how they are going to benefit, how it's going to meet their needs, how it's going to be of value to them.
What are some, we all have tough conversations. We all have these moments where we're trying to persuade or trying to, I don't say argue a point or persuade somebody to our side of an issue. Is there some language, some words, some things that you can say that help that? I know there's got to be something that there's some language there that you could use that helps you do that.
Well, there's a 5-step process that we talk about in The Go-Giver Influencer, which is our latest book, which really, I think John and I both feel is our favorite book, and it's the best in the series.
Yes.
And, the first part of it, the first law or secret, if you will, even though it's really not a secret, is to control your own emotions, master your own emotions. Because, there are those times people say or do something, and it, whether intentionally or not, and it pushes our buttons.
Ooh.
And we lose control, and we become either frustrated or helpless or victim-y or angry, and we say or do that very thing that is totally counterproductive to getting the results we want. So that's the first one. And we're emotional as human beings. We're emotional. We like to think we're logic based, but we're not. We have logic within us, but we're emotion based. We make major decisions based on logic. We back up those emotional decisions with logic. So we rationalize, which simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. And what we've got to do is not deny our emotions. First, it's contrary to human nature. We could never sustain that. And there's no need to. Emotions are a wonderful part of life. They bring us joy. They make life worthwhile. No. We just need to be able to master our emotions as opposed to our emotions mastering us. So we can start there. Second is to step into the other person's shoes. Now, that sounds trite because we've heard that saying before. Well, isn't stepping into another person's shoes pretty easy? Not necessarily, when you think about the fact that most of us have different size feet. Now, what does that mean? It means literally we can't necessarily step into their shoes. Figuratively, we can't step into their head or their mind or their thoughts, because we're not them. And just as human beings, we all see the world from our own different set of beliefs and values and understandings. So does the other person. So what we need to do in order to step into their shoes is we need to ask questions, and then we need to listen. Not just listen with our ears. That's that surface listening. Not listen in order to give them their 2 cents so that we can then come back with our 10 cents. No, but we listen with our ears, we listen with our eyes, we listen with our posture, we listen, as one of the mentors in the story advised, we listen with the back of our neck. In other words, our entire being. And when we do this, 2 great things happen. One is we actually do understand where they're coming from. And unless you know where the other person's coming from, you have absolutely no chance of persuading them to a different, right? You know? So that's the first thing. But the second great thing when we listen like that is the other person feels heard. They feel listened to. And it's such basic human nature, such a human desire to want to feel understood and be listened to. And when we feel that way about the other person, we're much more likely to drop our defense, right? They're going to drop their defensiveness toward you and be much more open to your idea. Now, the third secret, if you will, is to set the frame. And this means nothing more than understanding that a frame is the foundation from which everything else evolves. And the person who sets the frame or creates the frame, basically they're leading the conversation.
Right.
I often use the example, and I'll do this very quickly, of the person, the young boy, a little toddler I saw in a Dunkin' Donuts restaurant, who was running around, and his parents called him over to the table. As he walked back to the table, he slipped and he took a spill, and he fell. Now, he didn't hurt himself, but you could tell he was kind of confused about what happened, didn't know really what to make of it. And he looked over at his parents, and had they set the frame of worry and anxiety and, oh no, my poor bit, right, he'd have started to cry. Yeah. But they handled it so beautifully, Rhett. They walked over quickly but calmly. They had smiles on their face. They had such a nice energy about them, and they just kind of applauded and they laughed and smiled. Oh, what a good trick. That looks like so much fun. And he started to laugh. What they did is they created the context for him to be happy, right? They created the context for him to handle the situation in the best way.
He was actually counting on, he was looking at them for a reaction.
Well, that's what he wanted, right? What was their interpretation of the event?
Yeah.
And they set the frame for him to act in a very positive, uplifting way. Yeah. Now, we can always do that when we first meet someone, but what if the other person comes at it from a negative frame? If we buy into their frame, then basically it's probably not going to go well. Let's say we're about to do a presentation for a new prospect. They don't know us. We don't know them. There's no real relationship, but somehow, whether they were referred or whether it was a company lead or a call-in or whatever it happened to be, as we're sitting with them, they seem kind of defensive and they seem a little angry, and they say, well, I'm not some easy mark. I'm not going to buy in it, whatever. Now, if we buy into that frame, well, now we're arguing with them and nothing good is going to come out of that. But what if instead we reset the frame and we say something like, and let's say her name is Mary, and we say, Mary, while we've been able to help a lot of people with this product, whether or not it's the right answer or right solution for you, we simply can't know without exploring deeper and determining whether it meets your needs. So please know our conversation is for both of us to discover that. And if it does, great. If not, that's okay too.
Have you ever stopped a conversation that started out well, then turned bad, and said, "Hey, we've got to reset this because we're not."
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to do that, and you got to say, we got off on the wrong foot, or I think a lot of times what it is, I think we both may be kind of talking about the same thing, but looking at it a different way. Let me ask, if I may, what are your thoughts? How do you define so-and-so? Or when you think of so-and-so, what, you know what I'm saying? So when you do that, because, conflict is by and large the result of two people talking about the same thing, but from two totally different points of view without realizing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So resetting the frame or setting the frame is so important. Then the next part, and this is really what you were asking about earlier, what you say, and that's to communicate with tact and empathy. And my dad has always defined tact as the language of strength.
Okay. I've
always enjoyed that because, it takes a lot of strength to not just react when someone says or does something, or to just click back that nasty email or on social media when someone accuses you of malintent, to not write back and right. But to think about what you're going to say and to consider how it's going to make that other person feel, and to think about what the results are going to be. Is it going to bring you closer or move you further away from the results you want? Tact, when you think about it, Rhett, is really communicating an idea to someone that they otherwise may not be accepting of, but doing so in such a way that not only are they not defensive toward you or resistant to your idea, but they're much more open to you and perhaps accepting of your idea. And when you speak tactfully to people, and that's often more in terms of attitude than anything else, but it's also the words you use. It's saying, Dave, just for my own clarification, and leading into something like that, as opposed to a you focus such as, well, you're not blah, 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 right? So those little things that we can do.
Okay. I think that's really great advice. And I do appreciate that, because I think we often get in those really tough conversations, and how you react in those goes a long way towards how successful you are in business and sales or whatever you're trying to pursue.
So very important.
I always tell my kids, the soft skills are almost just as important as the hard skills.
These days, I think more important, and I'll tell you why. Because the hard skills that you think of, the technical skill, and it's not that they're not important. They are. They are. But they're the baseline. I mean, again, technology has leveled off the playing field. A lot of people have talent.
Right.
That gets you into the game.
Right.
A lot of people have the general skill sets. That gets you into the game. And again, it's important. But what gets you to that next level are the so-called soft skills. Tom Peters talks about that brilliantly in his most recent book, The Excellence Dividend. Oh my gosh, is that the most fantastic book? And so I wish they didn't call soft skills, because to me it sounds like, well, soft skills, it's fuzzy and warm.
Right.
No, these are soft skills are hard.
Yeah. Well, it's actually hard to do, right? It's hard to, instead of sending an email, to write that thank you note, as opposed to just sending a quick email, right? They're certainly my mother talked about manners. We called it manners when I was a kid. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. I know I've kept you on here almost an hour, and I do really, really appreciate it. And this has been fantastic. This is the Power Lunch on LinkedIn Live. Thank you for joining us today. We've got a great show coming up tomorrow. We've got Susie Burke, and we've got Eugene Frazier tonight as a special edition of the Power Lunch. And Bob, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully keep in touch. And this book is, I do agree with you. This is the last one was the best.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And